I drove into Ridgeway just as the sun slipped behind the San Juan Mountains, painting the sky a soft orange that normally would have made me feel calm. But that night, I felt nothing close to calm. I'd just finished a 14-hour shift at the hospital in Grand Junction, 3 traumas, 1 code blue, and a stack of charting I barely managed to finish. My scrubs still smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. My mom, Linda, had insisted I come home for an important family dinner. She said it the way she always did, sweet on the outside, but sharp underneath. Still, a small part of me hoped it might be a chance to reconnect, maybe talk like a normal family for once. Maybe, just maybe, hear a simple thank you after years of stepping up when no one else would. When I walked inside, I noticed immediately that something felt off. The dining room was too quiet, too staged, like they had rehearsed something without me. My younger brother Ryan lounged in Dad's old chair with the kind of smug grin he only wore when he got away with something. Dad stood behind him, hands clasped, eyes tired. Mom moved around the table, arranging dishes she didn't even bother to pretend were homemade. "Hannah," Mom said, without looking at me, "you're late." "I just finished a double shift," I replied, hanging my jacket. She gave a dismissive shrug. "You should plan better." I sat down, telling myself to breathe. This was just another dinner, another evening where I'd swallow my pride and try to make things easier. But before I could even lift my fork, Mom cleared her throat dramatically, as if she were about to announce the winner of a talent show. "There's something we need to discuss, something that should have been handled years ago." Dad shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't say anything. That's when Mom reached under the table and placed a small wooden box in front of her. I froze. I knew that box. Everyone in our family did. It belonged to my great-grandfather, a quiet man who survived wars, droughts, and losses most people couldn't imagine. Before he died, he'd given me that box. Me, not Ryan, because he said I had a steadiness like his. Dad and I talked. We've decided it's time this goes to someone who actually needs it. She opened the box. Inside was the Heirloom pocket watch, silver, engraved, old enough to be priceless in sentiment even if not in money. My heart jolted. Ryan smirked. "Nice timing," he said. Mom continued, "Hannah, you already have your life together. Ryan needs something to help him feel valued." Before I could process the words, she picked up the watch and handed it to Ryan. My breath caught in my throat. "Mom, what are you doing?" Ryan flipped it open, fumbling like it was a toy. "Relax, sis, it's just a watch." As on cue, he dropped it. The metal hit the tile with a sharp crack. The glass shattered across the floor. For a moment, no one breathed. I felt the sound slice through me. That watch was the only thing I had left of the one man in my family who ever believed in me. Mom clicked her tongue. "Oh, Hannah, don't be dramatic. It was old." I stared at the scattered shards, feeling something inside me crack in the exact same shape. And right here, I'm going to pause, because if you've ever had your own family tear you down while you were doing everything to hold them together, I want to hear your story. Seriously, drop it in the comments. There's strength in saying it out loud. And if you want to follow the next chapters of what happened after that watch shattered, go ahead and subscribe. You won't believe how far this went. Back at the table, I felt my voice disappear. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't even sad. I was empty, completely hollow. Dad finally bent down to gather the broken pieces, but Mom stopped him. She said, "Leave it. Ryan didn't mean to." Ryan shrugged, leaning back with that same grin. "Guess it wasn't worth much anyway." I stood up. "I need to go." Mom rolled her eyes. "Always running away when things don't go your way." I walked out without answering. The cold air hit my face as I stepped outside,
And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for leaving. I felt something else, an unfamiliar burn spreading quietly through my chest. And though I didn't know it then, that was the night everything in my life changed.
Driving back to my apartment that night, the mountain roads felt longer than ever. The moonlight sat low over the pines, and every curve in the road reminded me how far I'd gone for this family. How many times I'd dropped everything, no matter how exhausted, just to show up for people who didn't bother showing up for me. By the time I got home, I was too drained to cry. I slipped off my shoes, dropped my keys on the counter, and collapsed onto the old couch that had traveled with me through 3 different rentals. The silence hit me harder than the night air. Ridgeway was only 2 hours away, but emotionally, it felt like living on a different planet. When I closed my eyes, I saw the pocket watch again, the way it sparkled under the dining room light before Ryan dropped it like a cheap trinket. And suddenly, everything I'd been trying to ignore for years came flooding back. I wasn't just hurt because he broke the watch. I was hurt because it symbolized every sacrifice I'd made. Every time I'd put their needs before my own. Every moment I convinced myself, this is just family. The truth was, I'd been carrying them for so long that I didn't even know what life looked like without all that weight. I thought back to when Dad hurt his back on a construction site a decade ago. I was only 24 at the time, fresh out of nursing school and drowning in student loans. But when Mom called crying, saying she didn't know how they'd pay for his physical therapy, I didn't hesitate. I picked up extra night shifts and handed over almost every paycheck for months. No one thanked me. Not once. They treated it like the natural order of things. Hannah will fix it. She always does. Then there was Ryan. God, Ryan. When he dropped out of community college and racked up $12,000 in credit card debt from car parts, video games, and God knows what else, Mom said he was going through a rough patch. She asked me if I could help him get back on his feet. I was working 60 hours a week at the time. I barely had enough for rent, groceries, and gas. But I paid off his debt anyway, because that's what older sisters do, right? They take care of their siblings. They protect them. They give until their hands are empty and their hearts are tired. But Ryan never changed. If anything, the more I gave, the less he respected me. I remembered last Christmas when I bought him a jacket he'd been hinting at for months. He ripped open the box and laughed because it wasn't the right color. Mom laughed too, saying, "Oh, Hannah, you always miss the details." Meanwhile, I was paying off another one of Dad's prescriptions behind the scenes because their insurance didn't cover enough. And every single time, I told myself it didn't matter. That's just family. That's what you do. They'll appreciate it eventually. But the truth hit me harder than that pocket watch hitting the tile. They were never going to appreciate it. Not because they didn't understand what I did, but because they believed they were entitled to it. My apartment felt unbelievably small that night, like the walls were closing in around me. I pulled the old throw blanket over my legs, the one great-grandpa used to keep in the back of his truck for cold nights. I'd taken it after he died because the smell reminded me of him. Warm, honest, kind. Everything the rest of the family didn't seem to understand. When he gave me that pocket watch at age 12, he said, "You've got a good heart, Hannah. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I used to believe him, but the older I got, the harder it became to hold on to that version of myself. Being the responsible one wasn't noble. It was lonely. And being the dependable one wasn't rewarding. It was draining. Sitting there on my couch, staring at my hands, I realized something. I'd poured so much into them that nothing was left for me. Not my time, not my money, not my joy, not even my self-worth. For years, I had convinced myself they loved me. They just didn't show it well. But after seeing Mom toss away the only family heirloom that ever meant anything to me, after watching Ryan laugh as it shattered against the tile, I had to face a truth I never wanted to admit. They didn't respect me. They didn't value me. They valued what I could do for them.
And that realization, it cracked something inside me deeper than any shattered watch ever could.
The morning after that dinner, I woke up with a headache so heavy it felt like someone had stacked rocks on my skull. I barely slept. Every time I drifted off, I'd see Ryan smirk, the broken watch on the floor, Mom calling me dramatic. It played in my mind like a loop I couldn't shut off. I dragged myself to the kitchen, made a cup of coffee, and tried to focus on the quiet hum of my apartment. Anything to drown out the memory of their laughter. But peace didn't last long. My phone buzzed on the counter, lighting up with Mom's name. I considered ignoring it. I should have. But old habits die hard. I answered. Yeah? Her voice came out sharp, irritated, already accusing. Hannah, the hospital billed Ryan again for his follow-up visit. It's $4,600. They said you could handle it directly since you work there. I blinked. Why would they say that? Well, because you've always taken care of it, so you need to handle this one too. He's stressed enough as it is. There it was again. My assigned role. The fixer. The provider. The invisible backbone of a family that never bothered thanking me. No, I said quietly. Mom paused, like she couldn't process the word. What did you say? I said no, I'm not paying his bill. Silence stretched for a beat. Then she snapped. Are you serious, Hannah? Your brother is struggling. You know that. You're being unbelievably selfish. Selfish? I felt the heat rise in my chest. You and Dad both have full-time incomes. Ryan is 25 years old. He's not a child. He can handle his own bills. Mom scoffed. He's your brother. He needs you. He needs support. You make more than he does. I gripped the edge of the counter. I work 60 hours a week in an ER. I earn every penny I make. I'm not paying another bill for him. Her tone sharpened. Fine. If you won't take responsibility, I'll make sure the whole family knows how you're abandoning Ryan during a crisis. And she hung up. Just like that. Like I was the villain. I stared at my phone, shocked at how quickly she'd turned me into the target. The anger hit me like a punch to the ribs. For years, I'd let moments like this slide. I'd swallow my pride. I'd let her rewrite stories until I became the bad guy she wanted me to be. But something inside me changed that morning. Something finally snapped. I knew what was coming. Mom had a pattern. When she didn't get her way, she called every relative she could think of, twisting the truth until she convinced them that she was the victim and I was the cold-hearted daughter turning her back on family. She didn't even wait an hour. By noon, I got a flood of texts from my Aunt Valerie, my Uncle Tom, even distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Ryan needs your help. You know he's not well. Why would you do this to your mom? Hannah, be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. That phrase, God, I'd heard it my whole life, and it always meant the same thing. Sacrifice yourself for people who won't do the same for you. I felt my stomach twist, not from guilt, but from clarity. They didn't know the real story, because Mom never told it. She only told the parts that made her look righteous and me look heartless. I sat on my couch, scrolling through the messages, feeling my pulse climb higher and higher. Every guilt-tripping text made the truth sharper, clearer, brighter. They weren't asking me to help. They were ordering me to surrender. I threw my phone onto the cushion beside me, rubbing my temples. I could feel anger vibrating under my skin like electricity. Not just anger at Mom, not just at Ryan, but at myself. For all the years I'd enabled this, for all the times I'd believed their version of me instead of my own. When Monica came over that evening, I was still pacing the apartment, handshaking. What happened now? She asked, sitting on the edge of the couch. I told her everything, the call, the bill, the guilt-tripping barrage. She listened quietly, eyebrows lowering with every detail. When she finished, she sighed. Hannah, you've basically been raising your mother and your brother. They treat you like an adult ATM with a pulse. And you know what?
They're mad because their machine finally said no. I let out a shaky laugh, part disbelief, part heartbreak. It was the first time someone said out loud what I'd always felt but never dared to name. And hearing it spoken, hearing it validated, made something ignite inside me. Not fear, not guilt, not confusion, but anger. Real, justified, overdue anger. The kind that finally makes you wake up.
I thought the anger would push me forward, give me the clarity I needed to finally stand my ground. But instead, the following gaze felt like wading through quicksand, every step heavier, every breath tighter. Anger burns hot, but despair is cold, creeping, patient, and it found me faster than I expected. The messages from relatives didn't stop. They came in waves, morning, noon, night. Hannah, family sticks together. Your mom is heartbroken. Ryan needs his sister right now. No one asked how I was doing. No one wondered if I was okay. No one cared about the years I'd sacrificed, only about the moment I finally stopped. One afternoon, after a brutal shift filled with back-to-back emergencies, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot. The sky was already dark, though it was barely 6 p.m., typical winter in Colorado. Snowflakes drifted across the windshield, catching on the glass like tiny stars. I should have driven home, but I couldn't make myself move. My hands stayed frozen on the steering wheel, knuckles white. My chest felt tight and shallow, like I couldn't get enough air. My thoughts spiraled, loud, relentless. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I should have paid the bill. Maybe I really am selfish. Maybe I don't deserve better. I'd spent my whole life trying to be strong, trying to be useful, pouring myself into helping everyone else. And now that I stopped, even once, the guilt hit me like a freight train. My vision blurred. I didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. I sucked in a shaky breath and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. From the outside, you'd never guess I was falling apart. I was the one who held trauma base together, the one families thanked after their loved ones made it through a near-death experience, the one who didn't flinch at blood, chaos, or fear. But here, alone in my car, I felt completely cracked open. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but habit made me pick it up. A text from Mom. "You're disappointing everyone. Even Dad doesn't know what to say." Even Dad. The one parent I thought might understand. The one who used to sit with me at the kitchen table, helping me with schoolwork, telling me I could be anything. I felt myself crumble a little more. I wiped my cheeks with the sleeve of my scrub top and finally forced myself into the apartment. As soon as the door closed behind me, I slid down to the floor, back against the wall, legs shaky. I felt like I was drifting somewhere between heartbreak and exhaustion, too tired to fight, too broken to stay silent. That's when I remembered the pocket watch. I hadn't unpacked my bag since the dinner. My purse sat on the counter, heavy and untouched. With trembling fingers, I unzipped it and pulled out the watch, still wrapped in the napkin Dad had handed it to me in. I unfolded the napkin slowly, revealing the shattered glass and dented metal. It looked worse up close. Bent, broken, ruined. A small sob escaped my chest. It wasn't just a watch. It was the last piece of someone who believed in me without conditions. Someone who saw my heart long before anyone else tried to take advantage of it. Holding it felt like holding the last unspoken truth of who I used to be. I pressed it to my chest and curled forward, crying harder than I had in years. Not just for the watch, not just for the betrayal,
but for the version of myself that spent years trying to earn love that was never real. I didn't know how long I stayed that way. Maybe minutes, maybe hours, until my phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it, but when I looked, I saw a name that eased something inside me. Monica. You home? I'm coming over. Don't argue. 15 minutes later, she slipped inside using the spare key I always told her to keep. She took one look at me on the floor, eyes swollen, watch in my hands, and said nothing. She simply sat beside me, pulling me into a hug, and for the first time that week, I didn't feel alone. "You don't deserve this," she whispered. "Not from them. Not ever." But her words didn't feel real yet. Not then. Not while my heart was still in pieces, just like that watch. In that moment, I wasn't strong. I wasn't angry. I wasn't brave. I was just tired. Tired in a way that felt bone deep. And I didn't know how I was going to climb out of it.
The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a blanket draped over me. Monica's doing. She had let herself out quietly sometime after midnight, leaving a sticky note on my coffee table that simply said, "Call me when you're ready. You're not alone." Her handwriting made my chest tighten, but in a different way than before. This time, the emotion wasn't despair. It was something softer, something like the first breath after breaking the surface of cold water. I sat up slowly, the pocket watch still on the cushion beside me. The broken glass caught the sunlight creeping through the blinds, scattering fragments of light across the room. Funny how something shattered could still shine. I picked it up carefully, running my thumb along the dented curve. For the first time since that awful dinner, I didn't just feel pain. I felt resolve. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up years, decades of online bank statements. As I scrolled, the numbers told a story far clearer than my memories. Payments for Dad's therapy, for Dad's prescriptions, for Ryan's credit cards, for Ryan's fines, for emergency household expenses, for gas money, for last-minute transfers because Mom forgot to pay the utility bill, for holidays where I covered everyone else's gifts. It added up fast, faster than I expected. $38,620. I stared at the total until the numbers blurred. That wasn't support. That wasn't generosity. That wasn't love. That was dependency. A system. One I'd been taught to maintain without realizing I was the only one paying into it. I leaned back, exhaling deeply. "This ends now," I whispered. For the first time, the words didn't feel like a threat. They felt like a promise. To myself. I spent the next hour shutting things down one by one. Automatic transfers? Canceled. Old scheduled payments? Deleted. Joint account access Mom had temporarily borrowed? Revoked. Email alerts? Updated. Emergency contacts linked to my work number? Removed. Every click felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I never knew I'd lost. When I finished, my chest felt lighter, almost unfamiliar. Relief doesn't come all at once, but this was the first real breath I'd had in days. Afterward, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window. The Rockies stretched across the horizon, calm and unmoving, unchanged no matter how chaotic my family became. Watching them gave me clarity. I couldn't control what they did, but I could control how much of my life I let them drain. That afternoon, I called the nursing supervisor at the hospital. My voice steadied as I asked about applying to the ICU program she'd mentioned weeks earlier. It was a step up, demanding more skill and more responsibility,
but it also meant a better salary, a new team, and a fresh start. She said, "We'd love to have you. You've earned it." Earned. Not owed, not guilted into, earned. That word alone felt healing. Over the next few days, I mapped out a new plan for my life, a life that didn't revolve around fixing my family's mistakes. Step 1, strengthen my financial boundaries. Step 2, prioritize my mental health. Step 3, stop responding to guilt-laced messages. Step 4, focus on my career advancement. Step 5, rebuild my emotional foundation, slowly, deliberately. And step 6, the hardest one, allow myself to stop caring about what they thought of me. Boundaries weren't punishment, they were protection. Protection I should have put in place years ago. As the days passed, I felt the despair fade, replaced by something steadier. Not confidence, not yet, but clarity, awareness, the realization that I wasn't powerless. I had simply forgotten how much power I had. One evening, as I sealed the application envelope for the ICU program, I looked down at the broken pocket watch beside it. I traced the initials on its back. GM, for George Mitchell. I whispered, "You were right. Kindness is hard, but strength is choosing yourself." And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally choosing me.
The confrontation didn't happen the way I imagined it. No big dramatic showdown, no yelling across a table. It came quietly, almost casually, wrapped inside an invitation from Aunt Valerie. "We're having a family cookout this Sunday," she texted. "You should come, please." At first, I wanted to decline. I wasn't ready to sit in a yard full of people who had spent weeks calling me selfish. But something in me, maybe the new spine I was growing, told me to go. Not to prove anything, not to fight, just to finally speak the truth out loud. When I arrived, the backyard buzzed with the usual noise. Kids running around, uncles hovering near the grill, cousins chatting in small circles. But as soon as people noticed me, voices softened, conversations paused, eyes shifted. I felt it immediately, the awkward tension of a family that realized they picked the wrong side. Mom stood near the picnic table, her arms crossed, lips tight. Ryan leaned against a tree, scrolling his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. Dad sat on a lawn chair, staring at the grass. He looked smaller than I remembered. Aunt Valerie approached me first. "Hannah," she said gently, "I'm glad you're here." Before I could respond, Mom's voice sliced through the air. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." I didn't flinch. "Hi, Mom." She didn't bother with pleasantries. "We need to resolve this nonsense. Ryan's school bills are overdue, your father's prescriptions—" "No," I said calmly. "We're not doing this here." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you can embarrass us by running away from your responsibilities?" I took a breath. Slow, controlled. "Actually," I said, reaching into my bag, "I came to tell the truth since no one bothered to ask for it." I pulled out a small folder, printed copies of every financial statement from the last 8 years. I'd organized them the night before, not out of spite, but out of clarity. I placed the folder on the picnic table. "This," I said, "is everything I've paid for. Dad's medical bills, Ryan's debts, emergency expenses, car repairs, utilities, one-time bailouts, monthly support. $38,000 total." Gasps rippled through the yard. Uncle Tom whispered, "38,000?" A cousin muttered, "I had no idea." Mom reached for the folder, but I slid it away. "I'm not showing this for proof. I'm showing it because I'm done letting lies paint me as the villain." Ryan scoffed. "So what? You make more than us." I turned to him. "I worked for that money, Ryan,
every dollar. And I worked through holidays, night shifts, missed birthdays, all so you could get a fresh start every time you messed up. His jaw tightened. And Mom, I said, meeting her stare, you broke the only heirloom that ever mattered to me. You laughed when I was hurt, and then you weaponized the family against me. Silence swallowed the backyard. Cousin Aunt Valerie spoke first. Linda, is that true? Mom opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time, her script didn't work. Her audience didn't buy it. Cousin Luke stepped closer. Hannah, I'm sorry, we judged without knowing anything. One by one, relatives nodded, murmuring apologies. Even Uncle Tom, who rarely took sides, said, "This isn't right, Linda." Mom's face crumbled, not with remorse, but with frustration. She wasn't in control anymore. Ryan muttered something under his breath and stormed off toward the house. Dad finally looked up at me, his eyes tired but soft. He said, I should have done better. For a moment, my heart ached for him, but it wasn't my job to fix him either. I stood taller. I'm not here to get anyone's approval. I'm just here to reclaim my voice. And in that moment, surrounded by people who finally saw the truth, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief, freedom, power. Not the kind that hurts others, but the kind that comes from finally protecting yourself.
The day after the cookout, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest. But it wasn't the old kind. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was something unfamiliar, something I had almost forgotten how to feel. It was quiet. Not the suffocating quiet that used to haunt me after every fight with my family. Not the hollow kind that came from begging for approval. This quiet was different, steady, grounded, earned. I brewed a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the early light settle over Durango's rooftops. I had moved into the new apartment just a week earlier. Boxes still lined the walls, the mattress sat on the floor, but for the first time in years, the space felt like mine. Not a crash pad between obligations, not a halfway point between my life and theirs. Just mine. I glanced at the small wooden jewelry box sitting on my kitchen counter. Inside it was the broken pocket watch, the same one Ryan dropped, the same one Mom laughed about. I'd taken it to a jeweler 2 days after the cookout. He told me it would take time to restore, that some pieces were delicate, maybe even irreplaceable. Stuff like this, he said, turning the watch gently in his hands. You fix with patience, not force. I smiled when he said that, because maybe he wasn't just talking about the watch. I'd been rebuilding myself slowly too, closing old chapters, grounding new ones. The ICU program accepted my application. I'd start training in a month. A fresh role, new responsibilities, better pay, and a team that valued my work instead of expecting it. Monica came over one evening to help me unpack. She lifted a box labeled Memories, peeked inside, and said, You know, you're a lot stronger than you think. I felt the truth of that settle into me. But strength wasn't what I thought it was. Strength wasn't carrying a family on your back until your knees buckle. Strength wasn't forgiving people who never apologized. Strength wasn't staying where you're being hurt. Strength was knowing when to walk away, when to protect your peace, when to say, enough. A week later, I heard from Aunt Valerie. She told me Mom and Ryan were living in a small rental on the outskirts of Ridgeway now. Dad picked up part-time work fixing fences for neighbors, and the family, those who once pointed fingers at me, had quietly stopped taking Mom's side. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel petty satisfaction. What I felt was closure. Their consequences weren't my victory. They were simply the natural result of finally setting boundaries. I didn't call them. I didn't gloat. I didn't check in to see how they were coping.
Because healing sometimes means letting distance do its job. Before heading to bed that night, I picked up the pocket watch from the jewelry box. Even broken, it felt lighter in my hand, like it understood everything I had carried and everything I had finally set down. I whispered to the invisible audience that had carried me through this journey, if you've ever had to walk away from your own family just to save yourself, you're not weak, you're brave. You're allowed to choose yourself. I placed the watch back in its box, turned off the lights, and let the quiet settle around me. This time, not as a weight, but as a beginning.